In this video for section 16.1, we're going to talk about forecasting and time series data. Forecasting is predicting what the future will be like. So you are probably familiar with the weather forecast, which predicts what the weather will be like. Planning is when you determine how you're going to deal with the future. So we take our forecast and we decide what we're going to do about it. For example, after you watch the weather forecast, you might plan to take an umbrella with you. Businesses have different forecasting horizons, and they often are working in multiple of these forecasting horizons at the same time. And this is how far ahead you want to look. So the immediate term would be about less than 1 month. Short term would be 1 to 3 months. Medium term, 3 months to 2 years. And a long-term forecast would be 2 years or more. The forecasting period is the unit of time that you're making forecasts for. Could be a day, a week, a month, a quarter, a year, and we need to have historical data that matches the forecasting period in order to make our forecast. It's hard to predict the future without having past data to look at. So for example, if we want a weekly sales forecast, we cannot base it on yearly sales data because yearly data will not show the variations from week to week. We need weekly data. Time series data is any data that's collected over a period of time. A time series plot is a graph that displays this data, and we put time on the x-axis. This is also sometimes called a line chart. So we're going to look at this example here, where we have a company that is needing to forecast revenues for the copier service portion of the company. We want to look at a time series graph and use it to answer these two questions. Has demand for copier services generally increased or decreased? And are there times during the year when demand is typically higher than other times? So you can see we have the numbers here, but a graph is going to give us a better sense of how we could answer these two questions. So I have my Minitab worksheet here. I'm going to click on graph and then scroll down toward the bottom and you see the option for time series plot. Click on that and then click on simple and click OK. And then I'm going to put the Y variable that I want in the Y variable box. In that case, this will be revenue. Remember, we always want the time to be on the x-axis. And then I'm going to click on time scale in order to set up my x-axis. I'm going to switch this to stamp, check the stamp box, and then in the box I'm going to put my column that contains the time data. So in that case, that's this month column. I'm going to put that in the stamp box and then click OK again. And here is my graph. Move this out of the way. See if I can make it big enough that we can actually see what's going on here. So in my graph, I can see the overall trend is that the revenue is increasing. So I see a general overall increasing pattern here, so that's good. So that answers my first question. Demand is generally increased. So I'll write that down here first. And then the second question is, are there times during the year when demand is typically higher than other times? So looking at my time series graph, it's a little bit hard to see here because Minitab was not consistent with how they marked the x-axis here. It would be easier if we had the same months marked. But you can kind of see that there's an increasing pattern as we go up through the end of the year, and then there's some decreasing months. So I have this downward part here that goes from January to March of this year, 2014. And then I see another downward part going from December, January, February of 2015. And then I see this increasing here up through, that's November. So December, January, February. So the beginning of 2016, I also see a downward trend. So I would say that it looks like my revenues are increasing through about May to November or December of the year, and then decreasing through the beginning months of the year. And that's useful for me to know as a business. It's useful to know when the increasing times are going to be and when the decreasing times are going to be. So I will say demand is typically highest, we'll say May through December. And decreases January through April. And this graph doesn't really give any reason why that might be. The company would need to do some more digging in order to figure out the reasons why it's decreasing during those months. But it does show that that is what's happening. So when we have time series data, we might have one or more of the following patterns. A trend component, which is a long-term increase or decrease over time. It could be linear or it could be nonlinear. So we see in our copy graph the long-term increase over time, which I would say looks pretty linear. It looks pretty much like a straight line through there. We could have exponential growth or a curve to our graph as well. That would be nonlinear. We could have a seasonal component, which is a wave-like pattern that repeats on a yearly basis or more frequently. So it could be a quarterly pattern, a weekly pattern, or a daily pattern. So for example, if you have a toy business, you would expect a yearly pattern where your business is going to pick up through November and December towards Christmas time. That's probably going to be your busiest time of the year. If you have a restaurant, you might expect to see a weekly pattern, where you have your busy nights on Friday and Saturday, and you have less busy during the other days of the week. You also might expect in a restaurant to see a daily component, where you have times around meal times where the restaurant is busier, and then you have other times where it's not as busy. So you could have those seasonal components. You could also have a cyclical component, which is a wave-like pattern that repeats less frequently than yearly. So it would be like every 2 years, maybe every 4 years. You can imagine some businesses around things like the Olympics, where it's every 4 years, and so your business kind of depends on that. Or there could be a random component. There could be no identifiable trend or pattern. So next we're going to talk about index numbers, which are a way to make it easier to compare values at different points in time. So we need to select a base period index and set that equal to 100, and we use this formula to calculate other values. So we take the value of the time series at each time, we divide it by our index base period, and then we multiply by 100. So we're going to do this example here, where we are going to convert this company's sales data to index prices. We're using 2006 as the base period here. So that is going to be my 100. So 2006, my index value will be 100. And then what I'm going to do for the other values is I divide the value in that year by the index value, which is 14. Then I multiply the answer by 100. So this is going to be 15.2 divided by 14.0, and then multiply by 100. Do that on a calculator, and I get 108.6. Same thing for 2008. I'm going to divide the value of 17.8 by 14.0, and then multiply the answer by 100. And I would get 127.1. And so the reason we use index values is they give us an easier way of comparing numbers and seeing how much growth, or it could be decline, I guess, but how much growth is happening. So I can see from looking at this index value of 108.6 that these sales increased 8.6% between 2006 and 2007. So that can make it a little bit easier to think about how much something is growing.